How's it going, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So, I figured I'd just kind of slap this together real fast and let you guys know what happened to the gun I about blew up in my last video. And some of you guys are just funny as shit. Like I seen a bunch of the comments in there that the first one that I saw and it was hilarious was, you know, random gunsmith comment here or something like that, or and then another one had something similar to do with that, with like ammo and all that other stuff. So okay, it seemed that throughout this whole thing there were a lot of opinions that were put up in all of this. I said that I didn't know for sure. I was fairly sure that it was ammo and stuff like that, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I was going to go ahead and find out. I didn't even really know what had happened to the upper, 100%, right? So I went out and I figured out those things. I went and looked in greater detail on the upper itself. Like in the video that you saw, I just kind of pulled the thing apart, and I gave it a quick little once-over, and I, set it back down and all that other stuff. Here is what had happened. Beforehand, before, all of that had happened, obviously, the editing on the shooting of it, there were a bunch of jump cuts and stuff in there. And the one that was pointed out that was a little important was in the clip before the one that I showed that the gun actually, blew up, right? It shows that a dust cover was open, did a bunch of shooting, and then it jump cut, and then it went back to me going up to shoot the thing, and the dust cover was closed. There's only really one circumstance in which that happens, and it's kind of a reflexive habit for me, and that's the only reason why I know that was a thing, is generally speaking, if I do a bunch of shooting and stuff like that, and then I go to top the gun off, like stick a fresh magazine in it, it's kind of a reflexive habit, especially since it's on the right-hand side of the gun. It's a bunch of the institutional inbreeding that just kind of followed me. Was that right after topping off a gun, I'll sit there and yank on the thing, make sure that there's a round in the chamber, let it go, make sure it goes into battery, and then I'll close the dust cover. So for those that said that the rifle fired out of battery, that's not what happened. It absolutely fired in battery. Second one was the headspace issue, right? Now, I started to comment on this, and I started to explain, but more and more of the same stuff came out, like a bajillion comments saying it fired out of battery or that the headspace was bad. Look, it comes as no surprise that because I rotate through a lot of different gun parts and because I do a lot of different reviews and stuff like that, and by the very nature of ARs, I swap parts out all the time, right? Also, I do a lot of shooting, and it was something that I learned quite a while ago, that if you're going to be doing that on a regular basis, that you need to have a set of go, no-go gauges. So, anytime that I swap out parts like that, anytime that I swap a bolt and carrier into barrel extension of any kind, I make sure that the headspace is still good. The headspace was good on this bolt carrier group and upper combo. Additionally, this particular bolt carrier group and upper combo was used almost exclusively. Like, that's where it spent most of its life, was in there. So the headspace was still good, and it didn't fire out of battery. Now, I took this to a few people, and I'd essentially said, what does this look like to you? I have an opinion, but I'm going to reserve it until you give me your opinion, right? And the opinion was that I had a blowout. Like, essentially, a round was overcharged and stuff like that. And every single person that I would personally trust with this information and has done reloads has had experience in one way or another, whether they did it themselves or they saw it, that an overcharged round is what would go out like that, essentially, right? And what that essentially does is that, when a round like that is overcharged, it just finds a weaker part in the case. This particular portion happened to be towards the rear, because that's where a lot of that energy can go, because it can force its way out forward and backwards through the primer pocket and all that other stuff. And a lot of you guys saw that the primer was turned sideways, and then you saw where it had where the case was inflated and then where it broke off. So every single one of them, when I brought this to them, they essentially said, "Oh, classic overcharged round." So this is very much an overpressure issue. Additionally, a lot of guys were asking me about, what was the status of the upper. And at first, I just kind of threw a blanket statement out there, which is still entirely true. I don't really mess with that kind of stuff. If I see that something like that happens, and it has happened to me on one occasion before this, that I just trash the entire upper. I don't mess with it at all, especially with the volume and speed at which I shoot. I don't mess with it at all. I just replace the entire set. But because of the many questions asked about it, I decided to investigate this a little bit further, and yes, there were portions of the barrel that were bulged a little bit. The barrel extension was pretty well fucked. There was a lot of shearing going on the inside of the lugs where the bolt locks up. So where that bolt had gotten stuck, it also started to shear a little bit of the barrel extension, or the inside of the barrel extension. So that essentially is what happened. The barrel itself started to bulge a little bit, and it was really hard to kind of see because it wasn't looked at in any real depth. But where the barrel hooked up to the receiver, that interface was bent very, very ever so slightly. So what I'm amazed of is the fact that I didn't have anything crazier happen. I guess I can just be like, good job, BCM, because it all held itself together, and I didn't have pieces of it blow apart and screw up my freaking hand and all that other stuff. So I'm happy about all that, and that's great, but that's essentially what had happened. An overcharged round is meaning an overloaded round as far as powder is what caused this issue. So it led to all of that. Now, holy crap, the week I had. I'm gonna have a separate review for the T-Max class with Pat McNamara that I just took. But jeez, okay. Over the span of 2 weeks, this is essentially what had happened, right? My Glock 19 extractor spring started to wear out. It was fanning all over the place, and I had to replace those springs. No big deal, right? I replaced the extractor itself also because it's worn, pretty heavy. Because I just been replacing springs and not the actual part. So I replaced that stuff. No big deal, right? And then the gun blows up. And then I go to this class, and the RWMD rifle that I have. You guys know, a lot of you may know the barrel makeup of that particular rifle. It's a tapered stainless steel 1 and 8 twist, 223 Wild barrel, right? At first I thought I was just shooting really, really badly, and I'm like, man, I know mechanically this thing is much better than this. I'm just screwing up, right? So I'm just kind of sitting there assuming I'm having a terrible day. And then it keyholes. Jesus Christ. It keyholes, and I'm just kind of sitting there really frustrated at that point because I'm like, whatever. I went and I grabbed the 20-inch gun. The RWMD rifle keyholing makes a massive amount of sense to me. On 3 different occasions, it was used in classes by other students. I've taken it to classes. I've shot the crap out of it while teaching in demos and stuff, so it makes perfect sense that barrel died. But, okay, whatever. And then I go to a 20-inch gun, and I start shooting it a little bit. No big deal, right? Second half of the day, we go to pistol, whatever. We start the next day, and it won't cycle, right? It won't cycle because I pull it apart. Come to find out, one of the gas rings broke off, and it's just not sealed right anymore. For those of you that know how to deal with gas rings, so it is short shucking because I'm using Wolf in a 20-inch gun, and if you mess with that gas seal even a little bit, it's not going to cycle anymore. So I got those parts replaced, right? So really, the only 2 things that I'm dealing with right now are the barrel for the RWMD rifle and the frickin' the BCM upper, which I'm replacing with the Sons of Liberty Gunworks upper, specifically for the purposes of reviews. Like, if I didn't have to deal with reviews, I'd be going to BCM again, because their stuff is pretty cheap and it works really, 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 really good. Pretty cheap, relatively speaking. And that's as far as cost. But good lord, man, like the week I had on parts. But I mean, I guess it makes perfect sense between doing the whole being married thing and setting up the company and just teaching and all that other stuff. I've neglected a bunch of stuff as far as like my individual rifles were concerned. But what's really funny is that the couple of rifles that I had working were a pair of AKs, both 30 caliber AKs, my Mac 90 and the Vepr, and I had my short AR that still worked, and my wife's AR, which definitely works. And it was like half the ARs in the house were dead at one point in time, but that's pretty much fixed up for the most part now. I just have like 2 that aren't working, one upper and one dead barrel. So, but shit snowballs sometimes, especially when you start to really neglect your individual stuff that you take and teach with and all that other stuff. Like the home defense guns were fine, but it just started to snowball really, really hard. So, whatever, I'm out on the other side of it now, but really that's the end of this video. I'm going to be putting up a video on the review for the Pat McNamara course. That's coming up pretty soon here, probably tomorrow or the day after. It kind of depends on when I get around to it. But, yeah. Jesus. So, that's it for me, guys. Remember, regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy. Come train with us and stuff.